Speaking of Illinois, a new law will require all group insurance plans to cover fertility treatments beginning in 2026. That includes in vitro fertilization or IVF. Well, now the state is asking voters if they want to take it a step further.
They're asking if all insurers should cover unlimited fertility treatments in a non-binding referendum on the November ballot. Illinois Capitol Bureau Chief Max Cotton explains the ballot question and what it could mean for Illinoisans.
It is a very costly and expensive process.
Democratic State Senator Christina Castro was talking about fertility treatments during a February press conference when she unveiled legislation to make it easier for Illinois families to access that care. The bill, which is now law, requires group insurance plans to cover fertility treatments.
Diagnosing and treating infertility is an important aspect of reproductive health care that is often overlooked. Whether it is IVF, embryo transfer, or another type of treatment, it can be very difficult to access these treatments without a diagnosis, even for people who receive a physician's recommendation for treatment.
Castro's bill passed both the State House and Senate with broad bipartisan support. Governor Pritzker signed it into law in August. As for the referendum, it's asking voters whether lawmakers should look at expanding the mandate to all insurance plans, requiring them to cover an unlimited number of treatment cycles.
This is about people. If you want to have a child through IVF, you should be able to have a child through IVF.
The referendum is non-binding. That means Illinois law will not change even if it gets majority support. However, the results can inform state lawmakers on how to proceed, ranging from doing nothing to passing legislation or even putting a constitutional amendment on a future ballot. In Springfield, Max Cotton, WGEM News.